Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order and turn over to Mark. Oh, sorry, any public comments on the agenda? Okay. Turn over to Mark.
Thank you, Rick. So on tonight's agenda, we have 3 items. The first item is going to be an informational item, which is our 22. Sorry about that. The first item on the agenda is the budget comparison for the school year 2022 to 2023. This is our template document everybody should be familiar with from our previous meetings. We just want to go over, how we ended for the most recent month of May of 2023. Starting at the top with revenues, local revenues came in at $120,235,528, which represents approximately 102% of the budget for the year, compared to in the prior year of 103.22% is very comparable, and we feel that the budget is moving in a very positive direction as far as local revenues. State revenues currently are valued at $15,831,866, approximately 64.63% of budget, and compared to prior year, again, very comparable to 62.23% in prior year for state revenue line items. Federal revenue, which currently as of May of 2023 is set at $1,382,182. 73% of the budget. Now, we've talked about this in prior meetings where the federal revenue is contingent on how much we spend at the dollar for dollar reimbursement. So obviously, as everybody's aware of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were spending many more funds in prior years to really beef up our PP&E and support our educational needs in relation to COVID. So we do believe the federal revenue will still come in within budget. It's just a matter of a timing. And we're working our way to spend those federal dollars as we get through the rest of the year. For total revenues for the year as of May 2023, we are currently sitting at $137,449,576, approximately 94.66% of the budget $145 million. In comparison to prior year of 94.39%, we believe it's very favorable and comparable. And we believe that revenues will remain strong the rest of the year and come well within budget of expected for the current year. When we get into the flip side, expenditures, obviously from wages, benefits, professional services, all the way down. The first line item is our wages. Currently, we are sitting at $48,552,263, 73.94% of budget. If you were to look at the payroll calendar and you were to count the number of payrolls we've had throughout this year in comparison to prior year, we are 1 behind. We spoke about this at the last meeting. The June of 2023 has 3 payrolls, while the prior year June only had 2 payrolls. So we are a full payroll cycle behind as far as expenditures go. We do believe that wages and benefits will still be within projected budget. It's just a matter of timing, and it needs to run its course throughout the rest of June. We'll have a much better idea as we get through these next couple weeks of June to where we're going to be standing as far as wages go. But we do believe that they're going to be within the budget parameters. Professional services, again, special education, as far as counseling, services, settlements, they are eclipsing our 2022-2023 budget as far as the line item. This is something that we've been monitoring throughout the year. But again, this is something that we are required to invest in from a special education services standpoint. Also, the need for substitute professionals. This relates to COVID absences in the beginning of the year, but then also backfilling some of our vacancies with substitute services is also having a effect on our current budget. As far as the 400 object, which is maintenance, we've talked about the various roofing projects, HVAC projects, Chromebook repairs, asbestos and sidewalk repairs that we've had to incur during the year. These are projects that come up on a basis as Mr. Lally and his team work to make sure that the district is still investing in making sure everything is properly maintained and safe for everybody to use. The 500 object, which is our tuition, as we've talked about, that is in line with prior year. However, it is expected to outpace our budget. Again, with special education costs increasing and enrollment as far as special educations go, this is just a line item we're trying to mitigate, but we are making sure we want to report it as being outpacing our current budget. The 600s, again, it's the 600 object, which is our supplies, are currently sitting at $4,698,898. Only 83% of the current budget, when compared to the prior year of $4.7 million, which represents almost 89.59%. Again, this is COVID-related PP&E that was purchased in the prior year. We're not buying as much PP&E. So that's why that line item is trailing a little bit as far as a percentage, and then also as a dollar standpoint. Equipment, which is our 700 object. We've talked about this in the past, how we've had to reimburse the capital reserve for the vehicles and mowers that were purchased by Fund 32. We have not had any new dollar expenditures as far as equipment and mowers. So that line item we do not expect to materially increase. The other objects and other uses of fund which relate to our debt service and our interest payments, they're being processed on an as-needed basis, and we believe they're going to come in very favorable compared to budgeted line items. So that is our top side review. When we look further at our revenue analysis by line item, you can see obviously the...
Mr. Digian, I just want to interrupt you for a minute. Just so the board knows, Mark discussed the need for substitute professionals, which has exceeded 22-23 budget levels. So just so to give the board some context, not knowing exactly what may or may not have happened with COVID, we purposely prepared from November to February to bring in more. We guaranteed work to some of our substitutes. We all remember how challenging it was the last 2 years, and just anticipating the potential for a spike, we did not want an interruption to our educational program. So what happened over the summer, last summer, was the board pays very well for subs. We're very competitive. Several districts matched us or exceeded us by a few dollars. So to up the ante a little bit, what we did was guarantee work, particularly on Mondays and Fridays, which are always challenging, especially when you talk about what the potential quarantine requirements were for 5 days. As it turned out, there wasn't a tremendous need because COVID rates did not spike, and obviously more people are vaccinated, and I really don't want to get into all of that, but we had to guarantee the work in September and October to make sure we were covered. So if we did have an extra sub here and there, we used them in cafeterias, we provided additional reading support, we made sure that we got a full day's work, but that's primarily the purpose. Every spring is always challenging for sub because that's when staff use their personal days. But that November to February was, certainly our responsibility, and administration did that. So that's why you see that the overage there. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Thank you for clarifying. Again, the next two slides are the newer additions to the board pack, to the Finance Committee packets going forward. This is the revenue analysis. The biggest takeaway from this one is, and this is what I was speaking to during the last committee meeting, was our transfer taxes. As of last month, transfer taxes were trailing almost 20% behind expected, as well as compared to the prior year. This past month, we brought in almost $802,000 in transfer taxes associated with the sale of only 3 parcels, 2 in Conshohocken and 1 in Plymouth Meeting. Those 3 parcels alone brought in $693,000 in transfer taxes. So we went from thinking that we were going to have a deficit in transfer taxes to now looking like we're going to meet our expectations as far as the revenue analysis for transfer taxes go. That's something that we'll monitor over the next month for the month of June when those properties are reported to the county and then the transfer taxes are collected. But that was a very large swing in a favorable nature from a revenue analysis goes. The other items listed on here are our current real estate taxes, obviously, or our current real estate taxes, which show an increase of $2.8 million, roughly 3.05%. That's contingent on the real estate tax increase that the board passed last year, as well as increases in assessments throughout each month. The earned income taxes, again, we're very fortunate to have the people who work in our district support us through the earned income taxes, so we're sitting at a very healthy $771,000 over prior year. Our delinquent taxes, while we did have some large transfer taxes, the delinquent taxes is still lagging in comparison to prior year because there was so much turnover in the prior year. So we're seeing a negative effect of that of almost to the tune of $2.1 million. Interim taxes, same methodology or same thought process. There are just not as many turnover or instances of turnovers of properties. Local revenue and state revenue are very strong. Federal revenue, again, that's a timing. We're expecting that to increase as the year, finalizes and we start to capture more of those federal dollars and get that reimbursement. And IDEA, our federal program, again, is a timing issue. That is $1 million budget that last year as well as this year, we expect to be up to almost $1 million in revenue at the end of the year. Correspondingly, on the other side of it, we look at the expenditure analysis. Again, this is just another summary of what was on the first page, but I just wanted to show this as more of a visual. Wages and benefits, as we spoke about, we are one full payroll behind, so we expect that number to normalize throughout the rest of the year, but that's just, we are $858,000 behind on the wages. The benefits, not only is that a factor of the one less payroll, but if the board recalls, we had the approximate $1 million healthcare holiday in December, in which we used our fund balance over at the consortium, so that did not require the district to make their monthly contribution for the month of December. The professional services and property services, as myself and Dr. Christian just spoke about, you can see the increases of $555,000 over prior year, as well as $469,000 in property services. Overall, expenditures are about $1.1 million less than prior year, so just about a little less than 1%. But again, that's predominantly due to the wages and benefits and the timing of that one less payroll. So this is where we stand for the month of May 2023. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. The next item on the agenda, the team from Raymond James and PFM Financial Advisors are here. I'll invite them up to the podium. They're going to speak to us. Oops, sorry, Mr. Carpenter.
Can I ask a couple questions about the budget analysis before we do? The slide on the second page slide, that one's not as much to scale. Is that a 3% increase in current real estate taxes? The 97 million to 94 million comparison?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
The second page of the slide, the bar graphs.
Yes.
So it represents about a 3% increase in revenue analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
In the current real estate taxes, yeah.
And then looking at just the general comparison, what are the likelihood do you think we're going to have to use the $1 million in fund balance that we have in the budget versus?
I think it's a little early now, but the $800,000 that we just brought in with the transfer taxes are going to have a very favorable impact. It may be able to mitigate the use of that $1 million. We do have to see how the rest of the year ends. We are working through some assessment appeals and some court stipulations, which will have an effect on that current real estate taxes. How they shake out and how the rest of the year shakes out, we'll have a better idea within the next week or two. Great. But that $800,000 did have a very favorable impact on our budget or our actual compared to a budget, and using that $1 million may not be as in play as we thought going forward.
Great, thank you.
Okay. If that's okay, I'll invite the team from Raymond James and PFM. We have Lou Verdelli, Gary Moore, and Olivia. Olivia, I apologize, I'm blanking on your last name right now. But they're going to discuss the current bond market, the CES renovation project, and just give a general overview of where we are from a financing options.
That one's on. Thanks, Mark. And I'm Lou Verdelli with Raymond James. Olivia Atlasik is also here with me, and Garrett Moore. So I'm going to give you a kind of a brief overview, and then Garrett's going to take you through some of the numbers that we put together in the presentation. The first thing I would like to do, though, is commend all of you for your selection of Mark as your business manager. He has been very proactive in reaching out to the financing team, really dating back to the PASBO conference in March when he stopped to talk to us and say you were looking at some projects and he wanted to hear what some of the options would be. And so we've had a lot of discussions to put together the recommendation that we have for your consideration tonight. Some of the things are a little bit different than what you've heard from us in the past in terms of the recommendation and what's going on with interest rates. You hear on the news about the Fed's been raising short-term interest rates very dramatically throughout 2022 and continuing this year. Early last year, you may remember you borrowed new money to take advantage of interest rates before they really took off. And that was a great decision to move as quickly as we did back at the beginning of 2022 and lock in really good interest rates on that new money. Today's environment really is dramatically different in that we've had all of these interest rate increases by the Fed of short-term rates, but long-term rates actually, they did go up quite a bit last year, hit a peak in the fall, highest rates we had actually seen in about 12 years. But since November, they've been coming down dramatically. And so that was one of the things that we actually talked to Mark about in March when he first said, I think we might have to look at some type of borrowing this year for the elementary project. And this recommendation, while interest rates are a little bit higher than where they were early in 2022, not much. They've come down quite a bit. But one of the big drivers in the recommendation is an opportunity that we haven't had in 15 years. All of the borrowings that you've done for your prior school construction in the last few years, we talked about, well, you were locking in interest rates at 3%. That was great. But the money was being invested at close to zero, and you were never generating any interest earnings. So now we're in this environment where you might be able to borrow a little bit above 4%, but invest the money at above 5%. So this big swing where there's positive interest earnings, be able to borrow money, invest it until you spend it on the project and generate very significant interest earnings that can be used to not borrow as much money and use some of those interest earnings to actually make the first debt service payment next year when the payments start. So that's really why you're going to hear our recommendation is to borrow $15 million. We had gone back and forth about whether the number should be 10 this calendar year or 15. There's an IRS rule that says if you borrow less than $15 million as a school district in a calendar year, you can keep any positive arbitrage that you generate during a 3-year period. So that really is the impetus for the recommendation to go with 15. I know you're still evaluating the final structure of your project and what those costs may look like, but what we came up with jointly as the financing team and the recommendation is to proceed with doing 15 million, take advantage of still locking in really attractive rates, but this opportunity that the sooner you get the money, the earlier you can have it invested to generate additional interest earnings. So the timeline that Garrett's going to review for you, you'll see basically contemplates the board taking official action to incur this debt in August. We would, in between now and then, be working with Mark to update the documents and update your credit rating so that we're ready to go and lock in interest rates in August. You'd have the money in September, and then he'd be able to start investing it out according to what the expected draws are on the potential project. So that's kind of the big picture. That's what the recommendation is. Garrett has some more specific graphs and some of the debt service schedules that he's going to review for you.
Great. Thanks, Lou. I'm going to attempt to be brief as we walk through this. But again, to the extent folks have any comments or questions, please feel free to interrupt me. Page 3, what's up on the screen. Again, every financial advisor has to have a few interest rate charts. So this is ours. I'm really going to focus on the top chart and the middle chart. The top chart is what we call the yield curve. And what you'll note, the red line is the historic yield curve, whereas the blue line is the current yield curve. The reason I pointed out, and what you've probably been hearing a lot on the news, is this notion of an inverted yield curve. Traditionally, the yield curve, as you go further out in duration, further out, the longer the loan is, you typically pay more in your interest rate. Think of a 30-year mortgage versus a 20-year mortgage. Typically, your 30-year mortgage comes with a higher rate. What we're actually seeing in the current market is that on the kind of longer end of the yield curve, it's very flat, meaning that there's no additional interest rate cost to financing a project over 30 years as opposed to 15 or 20. And we're going to come back to that when we look at some of the numbers in a little bit more detail. To kind of put a finer mathematical point, if you will, on an illustration of current interest rates, what Lou was alluding to, you'll go to the middle chart and the box in the lower left corner, that blue line that says current. So this line, the chart itself illustrates the 10-year MMD, which is the tax-exempt equivalent of the 10-year Treasury, which we use as a benchmark and a barometer for the broader interest rate market. If you look at that blue line, really the takeaway is where you see that percent greater, 70% of the time going back to 1993, so taking a long-term historic perspective on things, 70% of the time interest rates have been higher than they are today. So again, to Lou's point, they're not at the all-time lows that we saw a couple years ago, but still, again, historically speaking, a very attractive interest rate market for the district to be contemplating on borrowing. Jumping to the next page, again, this is the district's debt summary, which again is the portfolio of all the district's currently outstanding debt. And one of our jobs as kind of the financing team is always to monitor the district's debt for any potential refinancing opportunities. Again, we'll continue to monitor this as time goes on. But currently, if you look in rows 4 and 7, the 17 bonds and the 18 bonds, they're coming up on their call date. So again, no action and no discussion about it tonight, but the financing team will continue to monitor the district's debt portfolio should any refinancing opportunity arise. So jumping into the meat of the presentation, if you will, we really broke this presentation, the remaining balance, into kind of two halves. As Lou alluded to, the district's still going back and forth as far as what the actual project is going to look like. Obviously, the costs for those projects haven't come in yet. As Mark also alluded to, depending on how the year shakes out, there may be excess reserves. So really, we looked at it two ways. If the district decided to fund all of Colonial Elementary School with debt financing, or if it decided to fund some portion of it with cash reserves or fund balance. Again, we're not necessarily here to discuss the use of cash tonight, but again, just want to illustrate that it's something that the administration had informed us of as potential to use cash. So again, we wanted to at least illustrate it for folks today. If you jump to the next page, slide 6. So this is our draw schedule. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But this is specific for Colonial Elementary. And really what I want to point to is column 9. As, again, Lou alluded to, for the first time in quite some period of time, the district's able to earn a meaningful return on its reserves. So again, we currently have estimated 3.5% earnings rate on the district's returns. Again, I think as of today, that rate would be higher, but given that this is a multi-year kind of financing, we wanted to be a little bit conservative because things can change. So if you look down at the bottom, again, we're estimating, depending on the draw schedule and how the funds are utilized and how quickly they're spent down, the district could realize significant or meaningful, I should say, saving or interest earnings on its cash. If you jump to the following page, again, you're going to see throughout the numbers, Mark, as part of the due diligence that the district is doing, is looking at a 5-year capital plan. Again, tonight we're really just here to talk about Colonial Elementary School, but there could be additional projects coming down the line over the next 5 or so years. But again, given that none of those projects are really established or fully vetted at this point, we want to just focus on Colonial, but we're also kind of keeping a more holistic view of the future of the district. Page 8 is kind of the meat and potatoes of our analysis, if you will. So I'm going to, if you would, just kind of draw a line in between the two yellow columns, because the first blue section and the first yellow section are really the financings dedicated to Colonial Elementary School. The following colored columns are really taking, again, that holistic view on the future 5-year capital plan if the district was to go ahead and pursue everything based on the current knowledge and information. So again, just starting up at the top, the plan would be for this upcoming borrowing, again, to settle in September, and that would be a $15 million borrowing. And we're going out 30 years for this borrowing. So going back to the interest rate chart page, yield curve is very flat, so there's no kind of additional cost, if you will, from an interest rate perspective to going out 30 years, which is why we're doing it for this transaction. Column 9 in the black, where it says existing local effort, so that's the district's existing debt service, net of state aid. What we would be doing with the two issues for Colonial Elementary is utilizing what we call a wraparound debt service structure, as the district has done with many of its past financings. So if you look in column 10, for instance, the estimated debt service for this $15 million borrowing, what you'll see is the repayment schedule is about $750,000 a year through 2044, at which point the debt service ramps up. So what we're doing is we're amortizing more principal as district's debt pays off. The benefit to the district is it mitigates the upfront budgetary impact for your budget. And then in the the first yellow column, that would be kind of that cleanup issue to the tune of about $4 million to fund the balance of Colonial Elementary School. And that second borrowing will vary based off of the project size that you all determine. It'll vary based off of how much interest earnings are actually earned on the project funds. But again, right now we're estimating a little bit over $4 million to kind of clean up the balance of Colonial Elementary. I'll pause there before I kind of breeze through the rest of the presentation to see if there are any questions.
I don't know where to start because I'm not a finance person. So I guess I'll wait to see what you say. It would be helpful if you could put it in terms of if we put $5 down today, what happens to that $5 versus not in your examples or something like that. So the difference between the black and the blue columns?
So the black is what's currently, the district currently has on its books as far as its
Right.
existing debt service.
Right.
Column 10 is the estimated new debt service attributable to this $15 million financing that we're assuming.
Okay.
Column 11 is the sum of those two. So it's
Right.
column 9 plus column 10. So that's meant to illustrate kind of the new resulting debt service at the end of the financing plan for the district. Does that help answer your question a little bit? Is that
They're trying to keep it smooth.
Right.
Yes.
No, I understand the
Yeah.
whole wraparound thing. I just wasn't, I guess when you get to the part where we could, the 3.5% that we might be able to.
Yeah, and again, that's really illustrated. So kind of expanding on what I just said. So column 11 would be the summation of the $15 million financing. And then column 12 in the yellow would be kind of the estimated debt service for the $4 million cleanup issue. Column 13 then would be the sum of 11 and 12. So to your point, on that second borrowing in column 12, if your interest earnings are closer to 5.5% or 5%, that second borrowing next year might be, instead of $4 million, it might be $3.8 million. Again, we're only going to fund what's needed for the completion of the project. It's just that interest earnings is a variable that we might be able to actually downsize the second borrowing if interest rates remain favorable or come in better than what that 3.5% is assuming.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
You're saying there's no long-term negative to doing 30-year versus a shorter term. Is that the rate doesn't change to go higher, but or is that total value of the money spent is the same?
That's the interest rate.
Okay.
So again, going back to the mortgage example, if in the past you were paying 3.5% on your 30-year mortgage versus 2.5% on a 20-year, right now, again, being illustrative and hypothetical, those rates would be much, much closer together. So the price of going out 30 years from an all-in borrowing cost is closer, about the same as you were to go out 15 or 20 years. And again, that's unique to the current environment we're in. Again, if going back to that chart, that red line, that's more representative of what has historically been the case. So again, trying to take advantage and maximize on the current interest rate market that we have. Any other questions? Okay. Like I said, I'm going to breeze through the remaining couple pages. Pages 10 and 11 are the same draw schedules as we saw before, but this time it contemplates the use of cash, district cash contribution. So it would eliminate the need for that second borrowing. Again, to the extent that changes, we'll continue to monitor it, but it doesn't, the use of cash in the future would not impact this $50 million borrowing. It would just reduce or eliminate the need for that second borrowing in the future. And again, that's something that Mark's going to continue to relay to us as far as what you all want to do as far as the use of cash, how the budget ends up this year as far as what's available to use. That's a decision for the future, but again, wanted to show it for you all to have a full picture of it. Again, column 12 or page 12 is the exact same as before, but as I said, to the extent you use cash and it wouldn't necessitate the need for that second borrowing, that's why you see in column 12, there's nothing in it, right? So the $15 million borrowing in column 10 stays the same as the previous page. There's just nothing now in column 12 because, again, you're in lieu of funding it with debt, you're funding it the remainder of the project with available funds. Lastly, page 13 is just a high-level summary that Lou kind of already ran through as far as moving forward, the timeline. So again, we're here presenting to you all tonight. I believe if the direction is such, the motion that you see above would be on the, I believe it was the June 12th meeting.
It would move to full board approval on the June 12th full board meeting.
So that would kind of be the informal authorization for the financing team to proceed with the process. We would assume that the months of June and July, we'd prepare the various financing documents that are required. On August 24th, as Lou alluded to, that was when the formal incurrence of debt from a legal perspective would occur. That's targeting the August 24th meeting. Based off of that, and market dependent, we would price later the following week or soon thereafter with funds available for the district to use or invest in the September timeframe, probably the late September, maybe early October timeframe is what we're estimating. That's really all I have. Lou, did I miss anything?
Nope. I think you got everything.
Any questions, additional questions?
Thank you. No, just a real quick, the footnote that's on this is slide 12, where it notes that the district has a reserve of cash that's potentially, you see where I am, the district has 6 million of reserves. I'm curious, what does it mean where it says assumes no state reimbursement? What does that mean?
The no state reimbursement. So in the past, when PlanCon was relevant, if I'm using the right word or wrong word, you used to, whenever you did a new money issue, the project, the new financing or the new money project could be eligible for reimbursement by the state. So for instance, for every dollar of debt service that the district spends, it might get reimbursed 15 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar, more or less. Unfortunately, PlanCon hasn't been a factor in a number of years. So it's really just meant to illustrate that for this financing that we're assuming for this project, Colonial Elementary, that the state wouldn't be reimbursing the district on any of the debt service that it takes on.
If it happened, it would be a gift.
Say again?
I said if it happened, it would be a gift.
Oh, yes. If it happened, we'd be
Be a
going to a
miracle.
lot more meetings at a lot more school districts all over the state.
Joe, did we
Thank
ever
you.
get any money from PlanCon for the high school?
We did.
How much?
I know there was. We get roughly $12,000 or $13,000 every year based on the debt payment that we make. It's on.
Okay. So we did get something.
We do get something.
Took a lot of work.
It's allocated annually, but it's not appropriated. And I don't think it has been
For a number of years.
So they
decade.
allocate it, but they don't fund it.
correct.
That's good.
They fund the existing obligations that they have. So the existing
Yep.
projects
No
that they
new money.
approved, they continue to fund that. There's
And I think we also we applied, Joe, Dave, and you guys applied for the elementary renovations too. When there was a small window that opened up with the addition to Plymouth and the renovation and putting the air conditioning in all the other schools, and that was what, 6-7 years ago. So we're still in line for that one.
a lot of people in districts across the state that are crossing their fingers that one day PlanCon will come back.
I really don't recommend anyone.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Lou. Ultimately, now the recommended action, the required action now would be to move this out of the Finance Committee. So we'd be moving the recommendation for the $15 million for the purposes of providing the funds for the Colonial Elementary School Renovation Capital Project. It would move to the full school board meeting on June 12th, 2000. Okay, great. The only one other item we have on the agenda is, this is more administrative, but we want to establish what's we're calling Fund 37. As everybody's aware, we have multiple different funds across the district. Fund 10 is our general fund. Fund 32 is our capital reserve. Fund 38 is what we're currently using for the Colonial Middle School. This is purely administrative, so when the dollars come in, we can put it in its own fund. We can charge expenses related to this project specifically to this fund. It helps with administering the project financially, administratively. And then when the auditors come in, they can look specifically at this one fund, and everything is captured on there. So if it's okay with everybody on the committee, we'd like to establish that going forward to help administer the renovation project. Perfect. Thank you very much. That is all for the Finance Committee tonight. Anybody has any questions?
Are there any public comments? All right. Seeing none, Finance Committee is adjourned.
Thanks, guys. Thank you all. Thanks, Eric.
It's, yeah, oh yeah.
I feel like I'm very familiar. I opened it up and it feels familiar.
Yeah, I don't think I remember anyone else. Right.
Sure. I think Lou.
Scott Shearer is PFM. He was stuck in Pittsburgh. He was on the turnpike on his way over. He's calling me. He says he couldn't make it, but Garrett filled in, nicely, and then.
Yeah.
All right, is everyone ready? I'll call this meeting of the Facilities Committee to order. Are there any public comments on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, Mr. Lally, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We have just one item on the agenda, but an important item on the agenda. And what we're hoping to do is, at our last meeting, we discussed many options for the Colonial Elementary School renovation due to the future enrollment bubble headed our way. And we narrowed it down to two options, which we were calling option 4B and 4C. I know I sent out the email over the weekend again. I don't know if anybody got a chance to see it, but basically the difference in the two options, besides $2 million, potentially $2 to $4 million in each one, is option 4B is 15 classrooms, and option 4C is 18 classrooms, and option 4C changes the main entrance from the front of the building to the side of the building. So what
For district office only.
well, district office would be, that's correct, still in the front of the building. The side of the building would be for the school only.
So that was one question that I did have. So in 4B, that secure lobby, like what would that sort of be the same as what we now have like on the inner part of our building?
Correct. It would be basically if right now where Ann is or the receptionist there would be pushed up front, and we'd be moving her up front.
Okay, and then she would just be like buzzing people in that would then go.
Yeah, she would be able to buzz people in, but we also had it so that it was a little bit big enough that someone could actually sit there and wait for someone to come. And then we actually made like a room, I think, that she could get in from the auditorium. We were looking at that room also. But, yeah, it was a little bit more elaborate than just like a room and pushing her up front and
Okay,
you know,
then what
like she
she
is
has
now.
So to follow up on that, so if someone entered and Ann or whomever let them in, then they would walk the length of the hallway that's currently there, the center hallway, and go up the stairs to the offices.
Correct.
Because they would stay where they are.
Correct. They would, or if we needed to bring someone down for them, depending on, the individual or who it was, obviously, that was in the building.
Okay,
So it may be
thanks.
someone coming toward for them, or it may be someone going up.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So the main goal is what we'd like to do is we'd like to at least be able to agree on the direction so we can give GKO the ability. Kevin is here tonight, and if we have any questions, please feel free. We can bring Kevin up to answer any questions. But the goal would be that we give them clear direction to start moving towards putting together an actual bid package based on what the board would like to do. And then keeping in mind that it's very doable, but we are tight right now in our time frame.
So okay. So the entrance on the side of the building, like moving the entrance to the side, it looks on 4C,
Yes.
So then that has all the offices down here, like the principal's office would be down by that entrance?
Yes, that's where the classroom difference comes in, where we would have 18 that would move the building admin offices down to the first floor.
Okay. And then where would students enter the building with 4C? Like in the morning?
So in 4C, they're still entering on the side of the building, so it would be like right here now.
Okay.
So
that
on the
everybody
on the baseball field side.
Okay. So that front, like our current front entrance would be not an entrance
Well,
at all?
there's the design and there's the reality, right? So buses show up at various times, so for expediency, we would likely.
Right.
Like we open up multiple doors at the high school.
Right.
To
Kids.
get 900 to
Okay.
1,000 kids in, we would open up both doors, but the primary entrance would be on the side
Okay. Which,
for like late arrivals, visitors, those types of things. But to get people in and out, you're going to use whatever you can use.
gotcha. Okay.
They usually leave a little faster than they come in, but
I wonder why.
A little bit.
Would we still have the ability to use the front doors for like the third grade concerts and the things that use the auditorium, or would they have to go in through the side and then around to?
No, I think that's to Dr. Christian's point, is that we could still use them like we do use doors at the high school for larger events, that you would still be able to utilize the doors at that point.
yeah, I think, the board's coming to where we were talking with Kevin, therein lies the rub, right? Because the access to the auditorium, because we've talked about moving, we keep saying where Ann sits, it's the booth right here. We talked about moving her halfway up. We talked about building an office, using that long corridor as a space. But the reality is you have to have egress out of the auditorium for concerts. You have to be able to get out of the gym. You have to be able to get in the gym. So that is just sort of that space. And there's nothing we can do above that. So it is what it is. So, but we would take advantage, Rick, of those entrances and exits for all of our large assemblies, concerts, things like that.
Does the fact that the gym's going to be does the auditorium hold more people than the gym would now anyway?
They're about the same right now.
Okay, so
Yeah, they're about 800 to 900 apiece.
Yeah.
Is that right,
Okay.
Joe?
Yeah, you're right. Gym might be a little bit more right now
Right.
than the auditorium, but Dr. Christian's right.
From a bleacher perspective, it'll still be an oversized gym for an elementary school. So whatever bleachers we would decide to put in, because we would probably upgrade those, we can still house as many
Great
people
wood
as the auditorium.
bleachers.
So we need the hallways,
Right.
regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We even looked at moving the entrance to the auditorium down about halfway, but you're talking about the grade of the auditorium. It's just not,
Right. When you go in the
it's
auditorium,
very
it's just
awkward
there.
at best.
So, Kevin, I have a question for you, if you're available. If we were to go with 4C and move the CES entrance to the side and the district office entrance to the, I don't know, right from left, leftist center of the front, would we do something with that main entrance to make it not look like the main entrance anymore?
Yeah, we would want to do something there. We would want to certainly make it pronounced where people are supposed to enter the building.
Okay.
It might be the placement of the flagpole, it might be canopies, it might be signage. I think in our little diagram, if you notice in the lower right of the plan, I have just sort of a little box labeled sign. You know, I'm kind of thinking like maybe there's a little bit of a tower element there. It's kind of what we did at the high school.
What we did
just
at the
give
high
it-
school with that
give it
tower to make it
presence.
look like here is the entrance.
Yeah.
Because
I do
that,
like that the district
yeah, I do too. But I mean, at the high school, no one ever knew where the main entrance was, and now everyone knows where it is.
Right.
So I'd like to see whatever we do to do the same thing here from a design perspective.
And we don't have it designed yet, but certainly we know where it needs to go.
What experience have you had at other schools about this, and how do you? Like I feel like this is going to look awkward, but the logistics of it is people still need to walk that whole way anyway.
Yeah, it's the
Right?
same distance.
So it's the same distance, but I
Yeah.
think it feels different. How would car traffic be affected by this? So for pick up and drop off, you know, if we thought about those kinds of things, Dr. Christian, pick up, drop off, if we move the door there, we lose that front loop? Or do we still do dismissal from?
My thought about it was, and maybe I'm looking at it incorrectly, is that this CES entrance on the side in 4C is more about parents and visitors
Yes.
than it is kids. So that if you do 4C, any visitors to Colonial Elementary School don't ever have to enter the area where the students are,
Sure, right.
as opposed to moving where the kids enter the building. Like,
Although they wouldn't have to in 4B though, right? Because now
Yeah.
the security.
yeah, but they still would have to then go down the hallway, up the stairs to the second floor.
Got you. Makes sense.
So
Yeah.
but the kids could still enter, like you said, from the front. Wherever the bus pulls up, they'd enter. Right?
It's
So,
not like we were getting rid of the front doors.
Right.
We would just be training the public specifically that the new entrance would be over here.
Could we add any type of weird parking over here, like handicapped accessibility?
I think there's options in the future, but I think at this point, we were trying to stay away from getting into the Montgomery County Conservation Department because we're time sensitive now.
Sure.
So we had some options, I think that GKO looked at for the front, but for now, because we're just in that tight window now to get this done.
I think, and Kevin certainly designed that, some additional parking for accessibility during non-peak hours, drop-off and dismissal. I think the bigger question for the board is sort of a discussion of, you know, what is the need for the next 30 to 40 years from a classroom instructional perspective, growth perspective. You know, the challenges of this campus and traffic, I think, we are kind of the given, right? We'll do
We
the best
wouldn't know
we
what to
can.
do without it.
Yeah. So, to me, the challenge is, not challenge, but the discussion really should be between the two as far as we need 12, 15, 18 classrooms. And, you know, the board is, I think, has resolved the fact that you want central office on campus. That's been loud and clear, and administration concurs with that, and we're happy with that. So now what do we need for this building so that future boards don't have to make a decision in 2044 when when it's finally paid for, right?
What's the enrollment study telling us?
So enrollment shows over the next 5 years that we're going to increase by a minimum of 100 to 125 students. It then it tapers off, not tapers, levels off. And then really the next challenge in the next 5 years is what happens in particularly Plymouth Township. For example, if you read the Inquirer this morning, Preet, who is the developer that owns a lot of the malls in the tri-state area, is looking to add between 500 and 700 units at the Plymouth Meeting Mall, which could or could not happen. I won't get into the comments that the CEO made, but we know that there has been inquiries at a minimum. And then in Conshohocken, with Amerisource coming in, and you have a couple large complexes under construction, they're being advertised as not for families, but the reality is they're going to they're going to rent and sell to whomever can rent and sell to. So, it's a little less certain beyond that, but we know a minimum of 100 to 150 students in the next 5 to 10 years.
What does that translate
So-
into classroom?
So a minimum of 8 classrooms for those students, and then I would factor in at least 2 special education rooms, and then 2 to 4 classes for special areas, because we'll need an additional music room, you'll need an additional art room, you'll need, my druthers would be to add, if you had nearly 1,000 kids in this building, I would add an assistant principal. So it translates to, and definitely reading specialists who often share space. So that's where we came up with the 13 to 15 range at a minimum.
Do you think,
And just so the board knows, we're using every available space currently with our 800 students. So if we had vacant rooms, we wouldn't be asking for that.
You don't have any roaming specialists, right? Nobody's
We
homeless.
do not. We have reading specialists who push in a lot, but they do pull out and they use smaller instructional spaces. But we do not have any. We don't have art on a cart or music on a cart.
Yeah, we don't want to get to that.
Yep.
no, I mean,
No, and that's what, what was it, 4 years ago when we did the small changes to the labs and made them into from 1 teaching space to 2 teaching spaces. That helped us not have to do that.
right.
It's that the current first grade is 500 plus, the current kindergarten is 450 plus, and kindergarten registration was 420 last I checked, and it's still June. So we'll get, and I know we will get a minimum of another 30 students, because in my 6 years here, we've added a kindergarten to Plymouth every year in July or August because of the apartment complexes. We just pick up students. That seems to be when there's a change. Rosemary Gergaitis told me it would happen my first year here. It did, and it's happened every year since. So we've already budgeted.
Do you finally trust her?
I absolutely. And now Kylene is telling me that. Don't forget, I'm going to get another kindergarten. So, the growth is there because the current junior class is 355. And so you've got 455, 425, probably 450 by the time fall rolls around. So the growth is coming through.
Right.
And the 425 to 450 is staying with us for the foreseeable future.
So putting in, so like, it looks like Plan B would be enough classrooms to get by. Plan C gives us a couple, 3 extra classrooms?
Yeah.
Do you feel like they'll get used?
The greatest thing about our faculty is if you provide the space, they will find a way to utilize it. So
But I feel like versus in however many years having to go and renovate again, like what we did with, like little projects and, right. I mean, correct.
yeah, the biggest, the really, we'll use the space. Whether it's 15 or 18, I think we're going to be good for the long term. I think the question is where do you want your administration in the building? Because that's the usable space that I think we're talking about, right, Kevin? That's where the 3 or 4 extra classrooms come. So it's upstairs. It's actually that corner of the building. So you have Rose and Mike are the principal, assistant principal, and then beyond where their assistants sit, there's like a teacher workroom, and there's a couple small spaces that actually are used as like small reading instruction. So they're small group instruction. And we think we can get 3 to 4 classrooms out of that. So definitely would want, regardless of the situation, you want an administrator down on this floor with 1,000 kids. You want somebody by the entrance. I like where they are, and Rose is emphatic that she likes where she is because she likes being in the center of the building. And if you've ever met Rose Rock, she's rarely in her office to begin with. She's in the cafeteria. She's up on the 3rd floor. She's always moving around, as you would expect many elementary principals are. So could we take a look at a hybrid of these two and make that area a little more functional possible?
What about from a safety standpoint? And I just feel like we've said, like parents walking through the building up, like how often are there parents and visitors like on that 2nd floor in the administrative
So
offices?
regular visitors who know where they're going, such as our volunteers that help in classrooms, they check in. The main office gets a call, so-and-so's here. That it's all good. They go right to their space and help out. Anyone else, parent-teacher conference, something like that, somebody comes down to accompany them upstairs. But you'll put, regardless of which one the board goes with, you'll have an administrative office here. You could put the principal down here and have the 2 assistants up there. Now, think about the middle school. The new middle school has an assistant principal on each floor
Right.
of where the grades are. So they're in with kids. That's where you want them, at least a few of your administrators.
And I'm thinking like the new middle school, like parents really don't get past that front door. Like if you're
Right.
dropping off lunches, even if you have to speak with the nurse, like the nurse comes to you sort of in that vestibule area.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
that's
I
just
mean,
the challenge of this
right,
building.
like at that,
Yeah.
right,
Regardless of the options you pick, the challenge of the middle school corridor doesn't change.
right, okay.
So I'm going to throw something out there, and it's no slight to Rose, but you recall, I think you recall, you were here when we talked about keeping the wrestling room here because that's what the coach wanted.
Right.
And then when we moved it to the high school because the board insisted, accommodating a person. I don't want to make any decisions based on what a person wants because that person could be gone.
Understood.
So I want to make decisions based on, what's best for the building and the community, not what's best for a person because the next person may not want to be there, So I don't want to let that come into my thinking.
Understood.
But I do like the idea of, like at the middle school where there's an administrator
They're in the
on
mix.
every
Yeah.
floor at some point.
Is
So
it
even
possible
if,
with those 5 classrooms there on 4C? So the 5 classrooms that are taking over that space, could there be an assistant principal, like a smaller office up there? So maybe it's not,
We could. The other thing that
so one of those rooms, so then we still have representation there, but it may not be the principal's bigger office with her.
I'll tell you what, you're looking at, I know, and Joe's right, we even though it's 2.5 years out, it's still from a construction standpoint, we need to make a decision by the fall. One project's 17 to 19, 15 classrooms. The other project's 20 to 22 million and it's 18 classrooms. What if the board were to vote on a motion with a not to exceed number and then forced us to go back and look at the nuances of the questions you're asking? Like if you said not to exceed 19.9 and then we go back, Kevin, and I think you're getting some pretty clear direction here. We're talking about where the administrators are.
Right.
We're talking about maximizing the instructional space, and we're talking about making sure it fits the future enrollment. And then the fourth one, which we know is the toughest one, Joe, is access, right? Whether it's through the side or through the front.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. I really do think that we need to have an administrative office on the first floor. I really do feel that the way 4C has it where the public goes right in there, everything's right there, they don't have to go any further. Because currently, if you look on the, what we have, if someone sprains an ankle, a member of the public, and they come in on crutches, to get to that elevator that's there, they have to come in through the front, all the way through, then back and around this back hallway to this back corner. And I just think it would be so much better to have, like, no matter what, they just come in and they're taken care of right there. So I think we should have at least an administrative office where the
these
main.
offices are right here, though.
Huh?
These offices are right here. There's administration.
building.
No, I'm talking about building administration. But for when a parent comes in to get a kid who's sick or, right? So that's what I really like about 4C. But it makes sense if we're going to be looking at, obviously, more kids, another administrator for assistant principal. It does make sense to have some sort of administrative office on each level. But the main one, I think, would be on the first floor, I think.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that. I had one other thing that I was thinking about, and this again goes to you, Kevin, is, and I guess I think about this because of the other renovations we've done, from an architectural and visual standpoint or viewpoint, if you do 4B and you put a district office entrance and you reconfigure the look of it, and then later we say we want to add another entrance, like, to me, they should be done at the same time so that visually it's all integrated, it all looks good. I just hate the idea that I won't be here for it, but that somebody's going to have to add.
Right, and we talked about how that will cost more money, too. 'Cause
Right.
That was my, I was
So-
like, that's a great idea, and then your guys are like, yeah, no. it's
Yes,
not.
so I mean,
Let's
you
just
know,
spend more
if
money.
we go from 19 million to 22, I'm not saying that $3 million isn't a lot of money, but when you're doing a bond and you're borrowing money, to me, let's do it all at once, all correctly, and all, like, just disrupt everything once. Not that we don't want you back again, but let's do it one time.
That was actually one of my questions, is one more disruptive,
In terms of construction phasing,
yeah, in terms of coming in or school starting or, no.
Kevin's the master of phasing.
yeah, I think the phasing plans would look very similar
Okay,
between the two. Obviously, the 4C has a little bit more work on that upper level with the administration area, but it's going to be summer work. We can't get contractors in and out of there during the school year.
And then my other question is that if we move the administrative office, they're losing the LGI room. I remember my daughter when she was in they would go into that LGI. So, you know, and I think that it's small reading. Will we be, I mean, it's not all the same because there's classrooms, but that's something. We'll lose that space, is that a space? You know, because it looks like a really big room.
It'll have to be recreated. It's probably one of the classrooms.
It is, but we could
Take
put,
that.
like, we could probably put a divider in one of those
I don't know,
cabinets.
just,
Yeah,
whatever we're losing, just want to make sure that's my
Yeah,
only
the counselors use that, but we could take one of those classrooms and put a divider in very easily. So if we need to do lunch bunch, I have no worries about that.
I feel like everything, guys, these were my main points. Which one's safe? Pretty confident that both are very safe. Are coming in the front doors in a new seat. They're and all of those things. Yes, but they would be walking. They're both similar in disruption. The future space need, Dr. Christian much says both fine. C is, you know, nicer to have, but B would be okay. But to me, that leans slightly. However, you know, the thought of having to revisit that they had would cost more than. So, like, everything's evil. Well, still, like, that thought. If we really think classroom, you know, like, but at least. So I
Dr.
think I'm
Christian.
moving towards C as well.
Dr. Christian, with the addition of students, are we going to need more, another guidance counselor?
Very possible. Yep.
So, I mean, everything leads to more people. So to me, I'd rather have, like you said, they'll find a way to use the rooms, just like they did at Plymouth when we didn't need all the 4 new classrooms. They used them.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you need them, they're there, and you don't have to all of a sudden say, oops, we're short 2 classrooms.
I want to just ask about cafeteria space if we have that many kids. That's one room we haven't really talked about at all. But I
We
mean,
actually did. We talked about it at length, and we looked at multiple schedules. Oh, I'm sorry. And when I said we, I meant the administration. We did talk about taking where Karen currently is and using that as an overflow space if we needed additional cafeteria space. But Rose and Joe looked at multiple configurations in the cafeteria, and even with the increased growth, the last renovation the board did to the cafeteria is sufficient for our cafeteria. Yeah, it was great. No, it's an excellent point.
Yeah, we talked about it.
I didn't
We went
believe
through
in them, and
numbers.
they took me through it, and I believe now. And I don't get into scheduling lunch and recess at the elementary level.
The upstairs, second floor, 5 classroom slash current principal's office, would they have access to natural light in those classrooms?
3 of them do, 2 do not.
Okay.
Up on the upper floor.
It's basically cookie cutter of what's on the third floor now.
Got it.
How do they get light? Where do the 3 get light?
From the courtyard.
From in here, you'll get it.
okay.
Because you still got the windows and blinds go
I
up.
don't remember.
And then the scenario where people have to meet with the administration, even if we went with 4B or something like that, is that a scenario where the district office conference rooms are available for the principals to meet with people so they don't have to be trudged through, or is that just logistically it's always in use? Or
We do that now as needed. So frequently that conference room is used, the curriculum conference room, and mostly during parent-teacher conferences in the fall and spring.
Gotcha. So that's sort of what they do at CMS too. Like there's a general meeting room that's available. So because I know most of the principal's offices are actually towards the back of the middle school, but or on the okay.
Correct.
I just need clarification on something, the parking. So we're saying we're not changing parking at all. Parking is going to remain where it is. We're not adding or changing that. And then we talked about signage, and I see the one sign, and we're saying that's for the school. Is there separate signage for a district office?
There would be.
There would be. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't see the. Okay. Oh, gotcha. I didn't know that's what that was. Sorry.
Yeah, but to your point, Gail, we'll definitely, we'll need to have some extra security and some training so that we make sure everybody knows where to go and where not to go, if that's the option the board goes with. So, and because even signs, people to help out and say, so there'll be a transition process for sure.
Okay.
So again, I know that Dr. Christian said it, but my personal opinion is that we need to at least give GKO some direction. The concern with direction, why I keep pushing that is, the work that they have to do, we come back, 2 years from now and we start talking about change orders and things like that. Well, this is their time to start putting this process together where hopefully we're as airtight as possible. So if we linger on, it just makes their job more difficult to say, and then, we open ourselves up. There's some exposure there. So while I'm not saying rush into a decision, but it would be good if we had a decision that, the board would at least ratify at the meeting next week.
I think we've gotten plenty of information. We narrowed down the first, 12 or 16? 6 choices down to 2, and I don't see why we can't give direction tonight.
So what are the biggest things you need to know? Number of classrooms and entrance?
Money.
Well, right, but I mean, like, they need, right, as we're deciding this, what are sort of the...
I think it's the commitment to 4C would require a commitment to say, yes, we want to bring the administration downstairs. It's a little bit more money. We get a few more classrooms, but we want to get the administration on the exterior
That
wall.
doesn't mean we can't also have administration
Correct.
upstairs.
Right.
Upstairs,
We could-
that's
we-
what I
we
was
could
going to
still look
say.
at that.
Okay, because I agree. I think, if you're going to have a principal and maybe even 2 vice principals, you want to be able to spread people out. I agree. Yep. But I like more classrooms because I do think they will get used.
I like 4C. I'll put it out there.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns about classrooms not being used. I think that's the least. Yeah, especially from having served in a school, it will be used and personnel will grow. I think obviously we don't want you to sway, but in your ideal world, Joe, Mark, Dr. Christian, what would be most ideal for you? And I agree with Kathy about let's not go through this whole money thing and construction thing again. So do you feel strongly one way or the other as well?
Personally, I think we go with 4C, and as we go through 4C, we can look at any opportunity to do some valued engineering or where we can save some money along the process. So I think you do foresee we're wide open to some valued engineering that may be able to cut that number down.
Valued engineering is a new term to me. Is that like contingencies? Like
Savings.
Savings.
valued engineering?
Savings.
Okay, so like instead of this canopy, we do this canopy, or instead of this, we do that.
Yeah, but you kind of lean on contractors too to kind of when they bid it, that if they come in and you can save some money if they have a better idea.
We do our best to make 4C cost like 4B.
4B, there you go.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, how can we get,
You can chime in anytime there, but you can do some valued engineering to save some money.
It's a new term, Joe. Correct.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's the challenge.
Yeah, that is always the challenge of any valued
So-
engineering, right?
No administrator is ever going to turn down a proactive board who's looking to invest in the future of the building. So 4C, we're very happy with both. In context, though, just kind of keep it in the back of my mind, if we would ever potentially need, is the 5-year capital plan, talked about potentially another school down the road if enrollment explodes. Not that 1 or 2 million in this project going to determine that. I just don't want to handcuff the board. We were trying to be conservative, but we certainly, we're not going to turn down a wonderful project.
So we want 4C for 19 million.
What if, so let's just hypothetically say that, all right, let's just say we went 4B, 15 classrooms, and then 5, 7, 8, 10 years down the line, we have to go through this again. At that point, would you all imagine that we say another building, or are we going to try to squeeze out a few more classrooms?
Well, no, because, well, that's a bigger discussion, because then is it another 4 or 5 building? Is it complete grade configuration?
Right.
Because to me, the speculation for another building falls in the K-3 range, not in the 4 or 5 range.
Right, and I know we've talked about that, and I feel that it's too many for one building here. I feel logistics, structure, safety, I just feel like it's too much, in my opinion. So I guess my question would be, like, at what point, yes, I'm hearing K-3, but then at what point would we say, all right, 4 or 5 need some love as well?
So are you saying, do we have like a maximum number of students we would get to before we say too many people?
Well, that is probably a great question for a very lengthy board workshop, because I totally get what you're saying, but the challenge is you have a K-3 building that has 210 kids, right? So you have two extremes. So this facility already holds 900.
Right.
So even if whatever we did, even if we made all the elementaries K-5 feeding into the middle school, you're still going to have that disparate challenge. Because you can't add the Conshohocken, you can't go higher, and we're not taking away the one little piece of grass they have.
No, we're not.
And so, of course, now remember, Conshohocken is the only elementary school that can have outdoor recess in the rain because of the overhang. So there are advantages, but that's a great conversation to have 5 to 10 years. So, but it doesn't change that even if you did that, this would always be your largest elementary school.
And keeping in mind that this building was left vacant for a lot of years because the decision was made we didn't need 2 junior highs anymore, so this building sat empty.
Right.
And the 4 or 5 configuration came about to use a building that the district owned.
And when I came to the district, on top of that, the board was in preliminary, but good discussions about potentially bringing 6th grade here and having a 4 through 6 building, and 7, 8. The challenge with that was the covenant back here where we can't go back on the land. So, yeah, it's obviously you want your instructional program to steer the size of your buildings, but there are certain obstacles sometimes.
And having lived through the change when we changed, I don't know what year it was before I was on the board, where kids went to school, and the kids from Epiphany started to go to Ridge, and the kids from Cardinal Views started to go to Plymouth and Passy. It was awful.
Redistricting is very fun.
It was terrible, but I see that it would be very similar if we changed the configurations of the buildings. So, I mean, I'm for 4C, moving it on with a real good eye on the budget.
This discussion, but there will have to be a motion on Monday evening to give GKO direction.
provide
Absolutely. And then,
Our decision
well,
tonight
I
is
think
what.
we would, I think
think
we
you
would
just
show,
show C.
I think we would show both. And my recommendation tonight is that you move both forward for discussion next Monday night, and that the motion for the board to consider would be a project with a not-to-exceed number. And then we give, as Kevin just said a few minutes ago, the key area for him, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, is where the administrative offices go.
Very much.
Because other than that, I mean, yes, the entrances are separate, but other than that, they're fairly similar projects. It would not. It would be a motion, I have to work on the wording, but it would be a motion to approve the planning for the Colonial Elementary School project with a not-to-exceed cost of X amount of dollars for the anticipated growth, and it would be a range of 15 to 18 classrooms. I would, we'll clean it up, but that would be
But
the
see,
motion.
I would like to see that motion include something that says to include an exterior entrance to Colonial Element, for the two entrances.
We could put that in the detail.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me, the motion has to include the two entrances.
What I think we would do is, under the motion, we would put in the notes that this would separate the district office from the Colonial Elementary School. Just like we do in our other motions.
Right, but then also that the Colonial Elementary School would have a separate entrance on the ground floor.
Right, I'm with you.
So okay, that, yeah, I do.
Yep.
Because to me, the biggest thing we've been talking about for the last umpty-ump years is security. And to me, we need to right now make this as secure as we can.
I agree.
So,
Yeah, that would be in there.
okay, thanks.
You good with that, Kevin?
I'm sorry, I just talked in the
Yeah, I'm good with the parameters, and I would remind everyone that we'll come back with a schematic design that takes all your comments into account, along with additional work with Dr. Christian and the principal and Joe, and we'll bring that schematic design back to you so you can see how it resolves itself.
Joe,
That is what we'll
wouldn't
aim
there,
for.
in September, wouldn't there be a final board vote to move forward on the project?
I mean, if that's what we want to do, we can. I mean, I'm also looking at the time that we want to get this out to bid, because there's a good time to bid it, right?
When would
for
bidding?
dollar value, when people are setting up their summer work. So I'm trying to look at the entire picture of like, when do we really want to get this out and try and get it back?
You want this strongly finalized next, yes?
I think it would be best. I think that would be our
When
wise.
would we go out to bid, Kevin?
We did have a schedule, and I'm sorry, I don't
Did you
remember what-
have it? Was it November?
I'm sorry, was it
November?
November?
Right, so let me rephrase. Instead of final approval, if there was tweaking between June 12th and September, the board would see that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, I think the key is giving them the direction to say, we're going for C. If there's a tweak that they're doing the drawings and they bring something to our attention,
Gotcha.
and Dr. Christian, you want to bring it to the board, that's, we've done that all along in all of our work, right? So, we might come up with something, as you start, these guys start drawing it and drafting it, you might come up with an idea to say, hell, I wonder if the board would want to do this. So yeah, that doesn't close the door on any possibilities like that, but it gives these guys the direction to say, start putting the hard work together so we can get a good number.
We could do an August FMP if needed.
Right.
So I'm
Yes.
just curious
But
from
it's a
all of
challenge.
you, is there anything other than the money cost that you feel strongly about not doing 4C? So is there anything that you're thinking about, again, other than the money? That
we don't like?
Yeah, I'm just,
I like what I don't like in 4B, I should say, and I'm not sure what this, Mrs. DeSantis's, for lack of a better word, office being at the front of the hallway. I still feel like if she is there essentially alone, she's just moved further down towards the entrance. But but I'm saying in 4B, what I don't like is that she's there alone.
yeah, but is
I
there
don't like
anything that you're
that.
opposed to
So
in 4C?
In 4C, I think I like the entrance is on the side of the building. No, in 4C, I would like to make sure there is an administrative office
Which
at
we can do.
least on the second floor, if not potential for on the second floor and one on the third floor.
Right. So, but is there anything anyone's opposed to in 4C? They're like, nope, I don't think this will work.
Still don't like the entrance on the side of the building. I think it's annoying and weird. I think people will laugh and say that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. So, what? Where's the entrance?
Right.
Over there.
And that would take years to
But-
just change the culture.
But
Yeah.
the benefits, I believe, outweigh that. So that's the only thing I don't.
Yeah, my
the
joke I made to Kathy was that it's going to affect 3 people a day at the most, because like during the big events, the main entrance is still going to be the front entrance, and then it's just going to be when you're picking up a kid from school, you park, you walk an extra 13 feet outside to get to the entrance. Yeah, versus having to ring a doorbell, not being able to see who's there. Gotcha. I do think there's minor safety concerns with the 4C, with it being on the side that closest to the parking lot. There is an unattended door that could be left open or that could be kicked open. There's no one there at all to call for anything, but I still lean 4C, and I still like having
Joe,
the
do
budget.
those
I think
those
with
doors,
automatic door closers
Yeah.
and door alarms that we could put on there, I don't think that the door being open, we could eliminate that. There's door alarms now if you prop doors at PW.
Just
And
a
really,
quick
there's nothing you
question
can do and
that I probably
motivate
should have asked
safety.
earlier. The Wonder Spring still operates out of the cafeteria?
They don't.
They did, and that would not change? That would remain the same?
Yes. Yeah, same entrance. They coming back here in the morning. Everything would stay the same.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Are we that confident that?
Absolutely.
Well, I think again, maybe it helps to envision, like Dr. Christian said earlier, of all the doors we use at PW, right? And then once the children are in at school, all them doors get locked down. They never get opened again during the day. Right, so it's same kind of concept. If we needed them in the morning, someone would be there, they would use them, but then lock down, and then during the day, absolutely not. They'd have to come over here.
I'm running a volleyball league and I have rinks. Am I coming in those doors?
Well, first, we got to run your background check through Master Library, and I don't know. I'm only
Like, would people go through,
No.
like, you think that's still going to be the?
Again, I think at that point for nighttime activities, again, if you look at what we do at PW, we use multiple entrances, depends where the flow is, where the people are, where we want them to come in. So we're never really locked. They don't all go in the front door at PW or the middle school.
Cool, I feel much better now about the weird. Thank you for letting me work through that in my brain.
Sorry.
All right,
Are we
any
ending that
other?
conversation?
What?
Are we ending that part of the meeting? I just wanted to, can I acknowledge both Mark, since this is technically our last F&T and facilities meeting before the summer break. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank both Mark and Joe, specifically Mark for the work that he's done with the foundation. It's been extremely, extremely helpful to gain clarity in our finances for the foundation. And then Joe and his team, specifically for this past weekend, BCA had a fashion show, 300 to 400 people in and out. Joe and team did a magnificent job. They went above and beyond the call of duty, helping with lights, helping with stuff that we didn't have people to do. They did it on their behalf. So just wanted to say thank you and let you know that on behalf of the BCA leadership team that they really appreciate you.
Thank you. We were glad to help.
Any other board comments? Any public comment?
One board comment. As
Go ahead.
let them.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Parker Powley. I'm a junior at PW. So I think I agree with most of the board sentiment about 4C, but I had a question. This may not be exactly answerable given limited data looking in the future, but how quickly would you estimate that the 15 classrooms would reach capacity compared to the 18 classrooms?
The current first grade is 512 students, so they'll be in second grade in 3 months. So we expect in 2 years we would use those rooms. And then 18 classrooms probably the year after.
So, that
We're
should,
leaving, we need about 6 months more for design and approvals, and then obviously at least a year for construction.
so at what point would you say there is a need for more classrooms?
We're
with the
supposed to
15
level off.
and 18?
Based upon the enrollment study, we should level off by then, and then we would be at capacity for this building.
Interesting. So if we're leveling off, would 15 be sufficient given that more steady growth rate?
Well, it's a great question. We believe so, but the challenge is sometimes needs change. So here's a great example. For years, the district has had 2 autistic support classrooms at Ridge Park Elementary. The Pennsylvania Department of Ed allows a ratio of 8 students per 1 teacher in an autistic support classroom. We have 3 this year. Next year, we anticipate to have 4. So your enrollment may only go up 25 students, but if you have a specific need for an autistic support classroom, or for example, at White Marsh, we have our life skills classroom, and that has the same ratio of 8-to-1. If the need dictates using more space, then it's kind of it's kind of misleading to say, well, we only went up by 50, 60 kids, but now you're telling me you need 5 more classrooms. And somebody might say, oh, that's 10 kids per room. Well, it depends. What are the student needs?
And also you talk about special.
Correct. So, right. So it's, I wish it was easy, but it's a sort of a big jigsaw puzzle. So that's why we try to, for example, the new middle school, when the board approved it, it has a few extra rooms. Well, we anticipate that they'll be full because the classes coming in are much larger than the classes that are in there now. Just like your class is about 350, 360 kids, and the current 6th grade class is 440, 450. So think about like when your class graduates, it's going to be replaced by a class that's 400 plus. And then that class is going to be replaced by a class that's 450 plus. So a lot of the growth is already in the system. So we're not only looking for kids that aren't registered yet, we're dealing with the current growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And I was an English teacher, so that's amazing. Thank you for your question.
Great. Thank you.
I was just going to add, as someone who recently completed a home renovation project that went design and that set the budget, I appreciate the sentiment to set the budget and then design around the budget.
No comment.
All right. Thank you. This meeting's adjourned.